A very big welcome to your second question regarding parents and grandparents. So we've seen in a few of the other videos that intent plays a big role in seeing if a person qualifies for immigration. Now we saw this all throughout the economic programs, and of course this plays a role in almost every single immigration stream. You might think for parents and grandparents that they don't really have to intend to do certain things, but this example question that we're going to take a look at will show you that there has to be an intent requirement for parents and grandparents, but it's quite different from the economic streams. And here is your sample question. So this one's with Ludwig. Now Ludwig is a single man who immigrated to Canada 10 years ago after transitioning from being a student to a postgrad work permit to eventually being selected for immigration through the Canadian Experience class. He is interested in sponsoring his parents for permanent residency because they would like to visit Canada for a couple of months every year. He explains that he makes $120,000 per year in his job as a marketing manager for a bank, and that he has a large 4-bedroom house where they can stay. He mentions that the undertaking and sponsorship agreements both sound reasonable, and it will not be a problem to support them in all aspects of their stay, including food, lodging, and anything else that they would need. He will even hire a caregiver to help them with anything they need. Why would this application be rejected? Now we have A. Ludwig does not have any other family in Canada, so the application is likely to be accepted. We have B. The grandparents do not intend to join the workforce to become self-supporting. We have C. The grandparents do not intend to settle in Canada. And we have D. Ludwig does not have any children, so the grandparents will not have much to do. Alright, so as usual, if you want to stop the video now to figure out the answer, that is recommended. If you want to work through the step-by-step procedures to answer these questions along with me, that's what we'll do next. So when you read through that scenario again, some of these elements of the story should jump out at you. So Ludwig is single. Now when you see that he's single, you're probably automatically thinking of LICO. Okay, he is a Canadian, so he immigrated to Canada 10 years ago. Now we can see the part that's important for us with regard to parents and grandparents. He would like to sponsor his grandparents for permanent residency. Now you can see what they would like to do. So they'd like to come to Canada for a couple months every year. We jump into his requirements. So he makes $120,000 per year. He has a big house where they can stay. He's willing to do the undertaking and sponsorship agreements and support them in all aspects of their stay. So let's jump in here and start taking a look at the answers. So when we take a look at the question itself, it says, why would this application be rejected? And when you're looking through that scenario, you can see that Ludwig might be a pretty strong applicant in terms of sponsoring his grandparents. But we're going to have to think about this a little bit deeply. So we're going to take a look at the answers one by one. So let's take a look at A. Now for A, we have Ludwig does not have any other family in Canada, so the application is likely to be accepted. And if we remember from the scenario, we can see that he is single. Alright, so this answer here shows you that in terms of you as a future ICCRC Full Skills Exam taker, you need to really have a good understanding of all of the different little elements of family class. So this question here, if you have a good understanding of the last resort family class, or some people call it the lonely family member, of course it just means other family members that people can sponsor. Anyways, if you have a good understanding of that, you'd be able to know right away if this answer is correct or incorrect. Now, a lot of people might look at the money that this person needs to prove in order to see if he can sponsor them with regard to looking at this question, this option as an answer. And we could see, of course, that Ludwig would certainly exceed the amount of money that he has to prove to the government, but the real secret to knowing if this is the answer or if this is an incorrect answer is to know that the last resort family member or lonely family member, in general, these are just other relatives who can apply. It doesn't apply to grandparents. All right, we have a lesson on this topic later on that you'll take a look at, but again, it's really important to understand all the pieces of the puzzle with regard to family class, because this will help you to understand if A, in this case, is correct or incorrect right away. There's also another little tricky part about this answer, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes here. And with this, we know that A is certainly incorrect. Let's take a look at another option and work our way through this again, step by step. So let's jump ahead to D here. And now with D, we're going to unlock the key to answering this correctly just by taking a look at this potential answer here. So we have D, Ludwig does not have any children, so the grandparents will not have much to do. And it doesn't really matter if Ludwig has children or not when we look at this class. When we look at what the grandparents want to do, we could see that they would like to visit Canada for a couple of months every year. Now let's take a look at this in terms of the requirements for the person being sponsored. So in this case, it would be for the grandparents. Now, as we saw in the lesson video on this, they have to complete a medical check, criminal check, they have to be admissible. We have that intent aspect on the bottom here. They have to intend to live in Canada, of course, and of course intend to not use government financial assistance. So we could see that all of these requirements for the parents or grandparents do not really pertain to Ludwig's grandparents. And in general, Ludwig doesn't have to have kids in order for the grandparents to obtain permanent residency. So D is certainly incorrect. But the good news is that this brings us a step closer to finding the correct answer. So now we're left with two options. So we have B and C. And just by being able to use the same knowledge that we use to make sure that D is not a correct answer, that's what's going to lead us towards answering either B or C and knowing which one of those is correct. Alright, so let's take a look at B. They do not intend to join the workforce. And just as we saw with D, family class is very, very, very different from the economic programs. If you remember from all of those economic program lessons, that the person in almost every single case has to, of course, intend to join the Canadian workforce. Now with grandparents and parents who are being sponsored under the family class, they don't have to have this intent. their intent is a little bit different. So they have to intend to live in Canada, of course, but that's just because it's a permanent residency program. So just like everybody else. And intend to not use government financial assistance. So there's no mention at all about joining the workforce. Now with this, we can be sure that B is incorrect, and that leaves us with only C. So let's explore C as well, just to make sure that we have a good understanding of how to tackle this if it is something that you'll see on your ICCRC Full Skills Exam. So let's take a look at this in terms of C. So the grandparents do not intend to settle in Canada, and this is very, very clear from the scenario because we could see that they would like to visit Canada for a couple of months every year. Now the question for us, of course, is to see if this affects whether or not they would qualify for immigration under the family class. Alright, so remember, of course, that they need to have all of those things we saw before. They have to be admissible, medical check, criminal check. But the big one is that they have to intend to live in Canada. Now you can see this in Article 20. And this goes across to every single person really who wants to become a permanent resident of Canada. Okay, so they have to establish permanent residence. They have to want to and intend to live in Canada. The difference for the grandparents here is that they just want to come to Canada to visit for a couple of months every year. They don't intend to settle in Canada. And that's not an issue, of course. The only difference as an RCIC is that you would suggest for them to get either a super visa or just a regular tourist visa. Alright, so that brings us to the correct answer of C. Now remember that intent plays a huge role in immigration, and especially in terms of your ICCRC Full Skills Exam. So intent is something that crosses over into a lot of areas of immigration, and understanding a person's intent is something very beneficial for you with regard to preparing for your Full Skills Exam, because it makes the questions you're going to have to answer a lot easier. A very big thank you for tuning in from the whole team over here. It's such a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope that this lesson helped clear up intent with regard to parents and grandparents who are immigrating under the family class. Have a really great day, and thanks again.